Good day, fellow captains, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing something a little different and a little special for you. Today we're going to be doing a 2-in-1 gameplay video. So we're going to get 2 games for the price of 1. The price is 0 since it's YouTube. And also I'm going to be showing you alternate commander builds for the Weimar. One of the forgotten premium tier 7, used to be tier 6, German cruisers that got pushed up a tier and to this day still suffers, but also is still, when played correctly, a force to be reckoned with. So here we go. Now, back when the Weimar was released, this ship had, let's just say, stats that made it far and away one of the better light cruisers in the game, and it reflected in the community and forum posts once it was released. Reason for saying that is everyone complained to high heaven about this ship, and I'm assuming it was mostly battleship mains and destroyer mains that were crying about their ships getting set on fire over and over again. And hey, I get it. That gets old real quick. But when Wargaming decided to move this ship up to tier 7, there's one thing that they did forget to do, or maybe they didn't forget. But either way, it still puts this ship far behind the ships at tier 7, light cruisers or otherwise. And that's the fact that they didn't give this ship the 4th upgrade at all. So even though they moved it to tier 7, they didn't give it the tier 7 capabilities of every other tier 7 in the game, which to this day doesn't make any sense to me. And it's something that I don't think they have any plan on rectifying. And before I recommend this ship to you, the viewer, or that you spend your hard-earned doubloons on, I would recommend maybe watching some other videos on YouTube to find out what other people think, maybe get a second or third opinion regarding if the Weimar is actually worth purchasing. I think it is. I hope that in the future they do decide to add that 4th upgrade slot, although I don't think they ever will. And it's fairly unfair because the people that spent their hard-earned money on this ship, I feel like they are getting bamboozled, for a lack of a better way of saying it. And where every other light cruiser that is a premium or even tech tree get that 4th upgrade slot, this ship doesn't seem like it ever will. Just something to consider before you hit that buy button. With that quick disclaimer out of the way, we will start to take a look at the actual gameplay, and we can start to see why this ship got nerfed to begin with. You see that little orange ribbon at the top, and not much time has elapsed in the match. This ship sets fires on a relatively constant basis with a reload time of 5 seconds per turret. 5 seconds per turret, and each turret carries 3 barrels. So you're looking at 12 guns, all pretty rapid firing, and with this particular build that you're seeing in this match, this isn't even a build where I have tried to make the guns fire even faster. So technically you could get this thing with a even more rapid firing build if you built the commander that way. However, that's not how I built mine. This is an agile build so that I can trick enemy players into thinking I'm making one move just to make another. Now you can see this Prince Eugen is coming around the corner, and you can see that I had AP loaded. This ship is not a ship where you only will be able to use the HE. The AP is 100% usable and viable against certain targets, even heavy cruisers, should they want to show you full broadside and be silly enough to stay full broadside to you. They're going to go back to port real quick while you continue on the match, dealing damage to their teammates. for a ship like this, we will look at the stats and the armor later, but you will see that it is not much like, let's say, the Mains or the Eugen or even the Hipper. All of those ships have a substantial armor set when it comes to their hull, and they do have turtleback. This ship does have turtleback, but when I show you the armor scheme later, you'll see what I'm talking about. The nose and the aft of this ship are not very well armored at all. You can get overmatched by pretty low caliber guns compared to other tier 7s in the game. Now you can see that friendly Friesland laid a smoke screen and he left it. Well, I'm not really sure why he did that. Maybe he was getting pushed out by enemy sonar, but I will take it and use it and keep putting fire on this Iowa. With the guns on this ship, you can keep a pretty sustained rate of fire, especially if you fire gun by gun, which I do from time to time, instead of full salvos. It does help to keep the enemy on fire rather than giving them the opportunity to evade your shots and put fires out and get out of range of your guns, given that these guns don't have a very far range on them. Again, because Wargaming decided not to give this ship that 4th upgrade slot. And with that 4th upgrade slot, as you may know, it does give you either a longer range, a faster reload, etc., etc. So without that upgrade slot, this ship is at a pretty large disadvantage. The only advantage that it really has is, again, that small turtleback armor that it has for its citadel, and these rapid firing 150 millimeter guns, and they are pretty rapid firing. You can see when dealing with this second enemy, Prince Eugen, he's exchanging fire with me, and I'm getting off 3 salvos to his 1. So, again, as the community had been complaining when the ship was released and it was in games for the first time, this ship is a little ridiculous when it comes to the damage per second that it's able to put out compared to other cruisers of the tier, especially since it was being put against tier 5s at the time, and 6s, and sometimes 7s. But when you consider that at times this ship would be put into games where most of the enemy players or most of the ships in general were tier 5 at times, you could see how this would just overpower entire enemy divisions or entire sides that enemies were pushing or running away from. With the agile build, this ship does turn quite well. However, it doesn't have a great turning radius, just something to consider as you're maneuvering in game and trying to avoid enemy fire. So it's a boat where you're still going to have to make considerations while you're turning so that you don't run aground and make yourself an easy target for the enemy, because, well, you're going to be setting a lot of fires and you're going to be pissing a lot of enemies off, and they're going to be looking for you to make that kind of mistake so that they can take advantage of your slow-moving boat. For this second match, you can see that it is myself and my division mate, and we are tasked with holding this right side. Now, with any match that you're starting off in, obviously you do not know what you will be encountering right off the bat. Sometimes you'll have aircraft carriers that will be able to spot for you and let you know early in the match what you're going to be up against, but no matter what, right in the beginning, you're not going to know what you're going to be engaging. So, my recommendation to you is to, when in a light cruiser, do not sail straight at the enemy and make yourself the first available close target that the enemy has the opportunity to shoot at. Now, you can see I spotted 2 keys here. I held my fire until they were already being shot at by something else and those shells landed. Then I started shooting. I was not the first thing that started shooting. I was not the first ship on my team that started shooting. The reason for that is I want them to be distracted to the point where either they're going to fire at another target that already hit them, or they're going to be so late at firing at me that I will have such an angle that the chance of them doing any major damage to me is minimal at best. I see this constantly in games where light cruisers will sail straight at the enemy, and they will... It's almost like playing AI against the AI. They will sail straight at the enemy in hopes, I think, of sending torpedoes and getting some kind of magical torpedo hit that's going to eliminate a battleship. That's not going to happen, I can tell you that right now. Usually those ships get focused down by whatever team sees those ships first, and within the first 2-3 minutes, those ships are gone. They're already back at port. I do not recommend this action. If you're in a light cruiser, find yourself a decent island to try to get behind, like I'm doing here, to break line of sight, and use friendlies to spot for you if at all possible. If you are the one spotting, or you are the only one that can spot, that's fair. However, I would argue to try to stay dark as long as you can, wait for the enemy to fire their salvo, especially battleships, since their reload time is so long, and then engage at the same time, finding an angle to escape as you're firing your guns. And for any newer players, I recommend, as you're doing so, doing what I just suggested, also have a plan in the back of your mind for escaping such actions. Because oftentimes, as I said only a few moments ago, you are engaging these enemies, setting them on fire, doing a lot of damage, and pissing these guys off. They are going to want to get rid of you. There's a good chance that even if they're getting engaged from the middle, there's an enemy battleship, whatever, even if they spot your friendly destroyer, they're probably going to target you because you're the one with rapid firing guns that are setting fires. Just something to remember as you're playing these types of ships. I know I do it. If I see a fire-setting cruiser that is spamming HE at me or at my team, that is usually my priority target, unless there's like a Udachi or like a very dangerous gunboat. Then I might switch over to the enemy destroyer. However, in this type of situation, I would argue a player like me in the Weimar, you're going to want to get rid of me. Now you can see we absolutely decimated all of those battleships on this side. They tried to push and they got focused down. It's one of the reasons why I said you don't want to push straight at the enemy right off the bat, right at the beginning of the match. You're just exposing your ship to everyone that is in range of you pushing into the enemy team. Enemy team's just going to call you out with the command chat wheel, and you're going to be going back to port within 5 minutes of the match starting. It just doesn't make any sense, especially if you want to win matches, you want to get better at the game, and you want to make a difference for your team. Any kind of action where you're pushing straight into the enemy right away, even if you're doing it in a large group, let's say you're a whole division of ships, it doesn't really matter. If you're 3 ships pushing one side and the enemy calls you out, and now there's 6 ships shooting at your 3 ships, you're still at a fire disadvantage. So I would recommend trying to work out a plan, use islands to your advantage to keep your boat out of trouble from at least one flank, and try to focus down enemies one at a time like we were doing here. We picked a target, we burnt it down one at a time, setting fires, letting those fires burn, and sending torpedoes that would ultimately set floods. And one by one, each one of these ships went back to port. Now the key is a pretty dangerous ship when you consider the guns that it has on board. However, being that I believe most players don't actually know how to properly build the key and to have proper dispersion and accuracy on the ship. I would argue you could probably get away with a lot of maneuvers against the key. You can see I'm trying to get fires on the nose of this guy, but for some reason I just cannot land any fires on the nose of this key. But that's okay. He's pretty much done for anyway. Friendly Akizuki gets that kill with his rapid firing guns, and you can see that these two ships in tandem are pretty dangerous when it comes to setting fires and keeping fires on enemy ships. Okay, nothing else really special happens here. It's just us looking for the enemy destroyer that's remaining, so I'm going to do a quick cut to the end of this match. As you can see, there is a smoke screen on the water right in front of me, which is a pretty good indication of where the enemy might be. You can also see friendly torpedoes screaming toward that enemy smoke screen. Just a friendly reminder, just in case this is maybe one of the first videos you've seen of mine, or maybe it's one of the first videos you've seen of a community contributor for World of Warships. Smoke screens are torpedo magnets, notoriously, so I recommend you don't hang out in them too long. So there's the two matches that I promised you in the Weimar, and maybe that can give you a good indication of why the ship was nerfed to begin with. Now, just as a disclaimer, me saying that, I am not condoning the movement of this ship to tier 7. I'm just giving you the reason why, community-wise, people generally cried about this ship in the forums and complained to Wargaming to please move it out of tier 6. It's understandable, although I don't agree with it. With that out of the way, let's look at the armor scheme of the ship. The Weimar is nothing special when it comes to armor. She's actually one of probably the more lightly armored German light cruisers in the game, but she can still bounce quite a few shells. As you can see, her nose is actually extremely lightly armored, almost to the point of destroyer armor. But if you get a decent enough angle and are dealing with enemy shells that are low caliber enough, you can bounce shells. I wouldn't trust this 16mm armor to bounce anything above 203 shells. However, you can see that this ship does have a bit of a turtleback, so if you get close in enough, there's a chance that close enemy shells will just bounce right off and not hit your citadel directly. So if you're trying to nose tank against, let's say, a Pensacola or let's say an Exeter, chances are you're not going to bounce the majority of those shells. Okay, looking at the upgrades, we have Aiming Systems Mod 1. With the Aiming Systems Mod, and the reason why I chose it, I want that main battery dispersion to lower, so more of my shells hit, and I also want those torpedo launchers to turn faster if I get into trouble. For those reasons, I don't recommend the main battery mod, just so that you have those torpedoes turning faster if you need them in a pinch. For the second mod, you're looking at Steering Gears Mod 2 for a better rudder shift time. This is a rudder shift build, or an agile build. And for the third and final unfortunate mod is the Steering Gear Mod 3 for, again, better rudder shift time and steering gear repair should that get damaged. Since the nose and the aft of the ship is so lightly armored, it's important to realize that your components are going to get knocked out quite a bit in this ship. It happens a lot. Both your engine, your rudder, torpedo tubes, and guns are all going to get knocked out quite frequently if you get focus fired and you have a lot of HE shells hitting you, and having your steering come back quicker without having to use your repair party is pretty important. Taking a quick look at the stats, you can see survivability of overall 43, hit points of 32,000, and a maximum armor of 150mm, while a minimum armor of 13mm. There's your superstructure, with a 22% chance or 22% torpedo damage reduction. For the artillery, you're looking at 4 3-barrel 150 millimeter turrets with a firing range of 15.2. It's pretty minimum, and you do have to be careful when firing at enemies because they are going to be 15 kilometers away from you when you are able to engage them, which means, well, chances are they're going to be able to shoot at you for a while you're shooting at them. Reload time of 5 seconds, pretty darn good. 180 turn time of 18.4 seconds, not great, but not bad either. Maximum shell damage for HE, 1700, 8% chance to set a fire, and a maximum AP shell damage of 3919. It is increased here because of the commander, so if you change commanders, that AP damage will probably go down. Torpedoes, 4 times 3. These torpedoes are pretty decent. I'm pretty sure they're the same as you get on the Prince Eugen or the Hipper. So the 4 times 3, 2 torpedo launchers per side, each carrying 3 torpedoes. They reload every 68 seconds, so nearly a minute, and they have a range of 6 kilometers. They're not something that you want to rely on a majority of the time. Your guns are going to be your mainstay when it comes to damage. However, they are good in a pinch if someone's pushing around an island to get you out of position. AA is decent at 55 overall. You can see it does have a lot of different types of AA. However, I would not rely on this AA to keep you out of danger. Enemies will be able to hover over you and keep you spotted, or even keep damage on you with torpedoes or bombers. But that's where your maneuverability comes in. You are going to be able to dodge, especially torpedoes, because coming off of planes, they are relatively slow, and probably going to be able to dodge a majority of dive bombers' bombs, unless they're British and they hit you with cluster bombs. Sliding over to maneuverability, 79 overall. This is where it's at, with a 34.8 knot maximum speed, turning circle of 650, pretty darn good, and a rudder shift time of 2.3 seconds. This ship turns very easily. Concealment is okay. It's not great for a ship this size. It should be lower, with a detectability of 12.4. I think in my last video, the Zuma, I had down to 12.4 roughly. And yeah, for a ship this size, it should be down to 10, I believe, but that's just wargaming for you. Detectability when firing in smoke. If somebody lays smoke for you, great, but you do need to be careful, because 6.4 kilometer spotting while you're in that smoke means that if an enemy pushes you, they don't have to be in sonar range to spot you. You're just going to give yourself away. Speaking of sonar, let's take a look at the consumables. A torpedo detectability of 3.8 kilometers, while the ship detectability is 5.4. Pretty darn good. This sonar is capable of pushing destroyers out of position quite frequently, and with the build I have, you do have 3 of them. Next up, we have the catapult fighter. I use this to either supplement my sonar when it goes down to keep torpedoes spotted, or to spot over islands to spot enemy ships that may be pushing my position. For the repair party, you can see HP per second is 192, so relatively weak. I think it's actually one of the weaker heals in the game for premium cruisers. As for your sonar consumable, you can switch over to the AA battery mod. I don't As for the other consumable, the defensive fire AA, I don't recommend it. It is not worth it. Chances are that if you use that, the enemy's just going to use their defensive flying consumable, and you probably will just end up wasting it. So for my main commander, you're looking at Gunther Lutyens. This is the commander that I use for the agile build. You can see his main skill is called Gimlet, Cruiser Main Gun AP Shell Damage. That's why the shells, when you saw the stats, were a little higher when it came to that AP damage, that 3,900. When it comes to the general skills that I use, I normally don't use Burn It Down just because Ingenious is so powerful when it comes to keeping your ship alive. As you can see, cruiser gun traverse speed increases and incoming splash damage -7%. Also gives you a warning indicator of the number of enemy ships that currently target your ship with their main batteries. It's important when dodging shells from cruisers and battleships, and it's also important when destroyers are marking you for a torpedo run. For the second skill, I use full speed ahead, maximum cruiser speed, and rudder shift time. Both important when it comes to the agile build and for chasing down enemy destroyers. As for other skills, before it's too late, again, I don't recommend. You don't need it with an agile build because you're going to see those torpedoes no matter what. You have sonar. Even if you don't have sonar, you have the plane. Even if you don't have the plane, you have that quick rudder, so you can slip right between those torpedoes. As for expose, I have used it in the past. I don't recommend it, and I have used this ability with German destroyers before, and I liked it. But for the use of cruisers, I didn't find it too useful. For the third skill, Velocious, maximum movement speed. This is something that you don't necessarily have to choose. You can definitely use Sponge, or you can use any other skill in this tree. The reason why I use Velocious is I want the ability to chase down enemy destroyers if they're trying to run from me. You can use Sponge or Fortified to increase your HP or decrease the amount of damage that's coming into your ship. I could see its uses. However, for my build, I wouldn't use it. You can use it in tandem with Ingenious. That way the incoming damage or the incoming dispersion is a bit higher for enemies that are shooting at you. But for my purposes and chasing down destroyers, I will keep Velocious. For the fourth skill, Steer Clear, rudder shift time, and steering gear repair time. So you remember on the upgrades for the ship, we have the steering gears mod 3. This just kind of adds on to that. You can use acoustic chamber in order to get better sonar cooldown time, sonar duration, and sonar charges. However, with fully packed, I don't feel it's necessary, and I don't really need it. You can run that skill with expose and increase that sonar duration and increase the range at which torpedoes are spotted. However, for the agile build, that would mean getting rid of that fourth rudder shift skill, and it's just not worth it to me. Loyalty to the Navy. I believe this is a unique skill for the German commanders. I've thought about putting this on this ship and this build. However, to do so, I would have to lower the agility of the ship, and honestly, I'm just not willing to do that. That agility is keeping me in the fight to the end of the match. If I'm losing any agility and enemies start landing hits on me, especially with the armor on the ship, I'm going to go back to port much sooner. As for the fourth and legendary skill, Fully Packed. Cooldown for all consumables, -2%, and consumable charges +1. Also, when an ally is within 2 kilometers of me, the cooldown is improved. It's pretty important when using your sonar or your plane. Planes take forever to come back, so generally speaking, I'm going to use Fully Packed instead of By the Book. If I'm going to use By the Book, I'm going to start using Fortified and keeping Ingenious on there. At the same time, I'll probably, maybe use Sponge. As for inspirations, we are back to the typical agile build: Azure Lane Baltimore and Azure Lane Rune. Azure Lane Baltimore is all rudder shift, while Azure Lane Rune is rudder shift time and gun traverse speed. So adding on to ingenious. So that's it for the commander that I mainly use on the ship and the commander that I was using for those 2 games you just saw. However, for the second build that I started using, Karl von Mueller. With Karl von Mueller, the build will be slightly different, as you can see from the image on screen. For the base trait, you're looking at Hardy, maximum cruiser speed increased by 3.4%, so a little bit faster than normal. For the first skill, Beyond Range, cruiser main battery range. Improving that range is pretty important since you are at tier 7, and with the former build, you're only at 15.4 maximum range, so it does help keep away from those ships that are trying to get rid of you. For the second skill, Igniter, chance of cruiser HE causing fire, plus 3%. So these guns are rapid firing. They already have an okay chance of setting a fire, so you're just adding on to that. For the third and fourth skills, you're looking at Velocious and Steer Clear. So essentially, you're still building as an agile build. However, you are adding on to the range of your gun so that you can stay at arm's length when need be, and increasing the fire chance, so you're improving your overall damage per minute. And trust me, when you get in the neighborhood of 7 to 10 fires within the first 5 minutes of the match, you will see why this is so powerful. For the legendary skill, I have Refill Station, cruiser main battery reload time increased by 5%, but also when an ally is within 2 kilometers of me, cruiser main battery range, also improving that range by 10% when friends are nearby. So with this build, it's a total of about 20% increase in range. So I'm staying agile, still have that good rudder shift time. At the same time, I'm extending the range at which I am able to engage the enemy. For the inspirations for Karl von Mueller, I've chosen Charles Madden and Francisco Minbelli, both with a focus on cruiser main battery reload time. And with this build, you're looking at a 4.4 second gun reload time. Now, I understand that this ship naturally has a 5-second reload time. However, you're looking at a 0.6 second decrease in reload time, and also with this particular build, you're looking at an increase in fire setting chance. So really, you are increasing that chance of setting a fire a little bit more by faster reloading. However, you should keep in mind that the shells themselves, when penetrating, do damage anyway, and the fires are kind of just the icing on top of the cake. Well, that's it for me in this video, looking at a forgotten and nearly unused premium cruiser in World of Warships. I do hope that one day they're going to fix it and add that 4th upgrade slot, but I'm not holding my breath, and I don't think you should either. Overall, I would argue that this is worth doubloons, and if you, let's say you have a coupon for premium tier 7 and you can get this ship for like 8,000 doubloons, I think it's worth it. Personal opinion, not telling you what to do. In the end, it's your currency, you do what you want with it. I do think she is a blast to play whenever I use her, so I do find myself leaning more toward yes, you should purchase it, more than no, you should not. If you enjoyed this content, consider subscribing. Leave a like, hit the notification bell for future content like this, and even comment down below letting me know any ships that you're interested in seeing a closer look at, any ships you're interested in seeing gameplay of, or even other games you might be interested in seeing. I'm Buckshot Bucky. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video.